Jordan, I can't hear you.
I wasn't saying anything.
Okay, I am saying something, but
Can you hear me now,
I can hear you, yes.
Judith? Can you hear me?
Okay, for some reason I have go into something else here. All right, there we go. Hello. Now we can't hear you, Judith.
Can you now?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I need to make an adjustment here on my system. Okay, now I think I've stopped the myself speaking into my ears, and so I think I'm good. I'm not totally good, but okay. Would you say something, Jordan?
Yes.
Okay, and I hear you. And Judith?
Yes. Hello.
Oh, hello. Okay. Hello, hello. All right. I promised this group last week that I would show this final piece, so I'm going to pull this up just as a warm-up. So this is the City of Gold. And the interesting thing, what have I done now? Okay, something's awry here. All right, so can you still see the City of Gold?
Yes.
Okay, you can. There we go. All right. So what this turned out to be, this is 14 hours of work to achieve this. And I started a while back with just this fluorescent gold. And very shortly after I started, and I'm going to go back to the image of when I started here just for a minute. Okay, so this is the early piece. And at about this time, I named this piece City of Gold. Okay, just because I had this gold leaf paint that I was using. And I want to explain the thought process, because what happens is when you're doing this, when you're painting from the unconscious, it stirs up ideas. So this is a side shot of this down by my signature, where you can see that this is also gold now, gold leaf. And there's a lot of gold here, but in the photograph of the piece itself, which is here, down here in the right corner, you don't really see the gold flashing back. But if this were put under appropriately positioned light, this piece just lights up. The whole piece does. And
Right.
and the significance of this for me is, and keep in mind that I'm doing this as a meditation technique, so I'm seeing what comes up for me as I'm doing this work. And so this is 14 hours of work. I've been keeping track of my time on these things. And I realized that I remember that my father had a book called Tom Swift and the City of Gold. Back in the late 1920s, his mother got it for him and read it to him, or early 30s at the latest, early 1930s. And my mother read that book to me and my brother when I was in the 5th grade and my brother was in the 3rd grade. And it was just fascinating. And the upshot of the book is that there's a city of gold. It's either in Yucatan or it's in Peru. I don't remember what country it was in. But of course, Tom Swift naturally find anything in due course in the book. And then I realized that, oh, wow, this is really the same story as Indiana Jones. And then I realized that it's also the same story as National Treasure. And then I realized that the City of Gold is not something outside. It's not something you can find. People have been chasing the Holy Grail and the City of Gold forever. And these things are internal, in your psyche, not out in space where you can find it. And so this piece represents my revelation. And I guess I can figure out what date I had this revelation, which is here. So it was January 7th, about 9:20 in the morning, that I had this revelation that the City of Gold is actually in us. And if we learn to communicate with our unconscious, that it's really valuable because these ideas that we're talking about here churn up things in your unconscious that you don't even remember. And, I probably haven't thought of the City of Gold for, oh boy, at least 50 years. At least I haven't thought of the book that my father had, my father's book. And then all of a sudden, this name came up, and there it is. And thanks to my study of art, I have realized that this is coming from me. It's not something outside. And I've really been fascinated by how this process has been directing me and also churning up a lot of interesting ideas. So by directing me, I mean that all the lines that I put in first, these are all directed lines. So if I do this, my psyche tells me where to put these lines. And I just follow that as closely as I can without trying to direct it myself in any way. And then ultimately what happens is the one thing I am doing a little is I'm following Colleen's map of the soul. And so what she says, her dicta, which is based on Murray Stein's research, is that the lower left corner is the creative wellspring. And so I'm intentionally doing the creative wellspring as with reds or oranges, as something hot like volcanic or something like that. And then above the creative wellspring on the left side are dreams and visions. And if you think of this halfway across, the left side of the whole painting is the past, and the right side is the future. And so the upper right area is about your mission, what you're trying to dig out. And the lower right is about what your tools are to dig things out. And so the tools I interpret as wisdom, and I interpret wisdom as purple. And the mission I have as yellow, which is a color for hope. In the dreams and visions, I'm using mainly blues and purples, which is dark. It's your nighttime self. And the the red in the lower left as, what gets you going in the morning, the creative wellspring. Now, there's two other ideas in here. One is that down the middle at the lower level is something that's blocking you. So here you see a very dark blue that's blocking the passage of all this heat over to my current tools. And up above it in the middle is the ideal, which is that things flow up into the hope section. That's the ideal. And then the middle area is the self. Somewhere in here, we find the self. I'm not going to really talk about that. But of course, obviously within this, I'm doing it very loosely with very loose watercolor so that I get the rocky effect. And obviously I've used the Colleen's doodle first to create the format or the lines. I doodle that. And then when I put the color in, I'm using very loose color so that you can see lots of things in this image. For example, here is somebody with a grimace. And so you can see lots of things in this. And I found early on, I found a dragon in here. I realized that this is a dragon that with a green tongue, if you will. And so it's a little harder to see when I get down to the finished product, but that's what I saw early on in this. So any comments? And Judith, I cannot hear you.
Okay, I just unmuted. I didn't want to make too much noise.
Okay.
How was the process for you in those 14 hours? I mean, you've said that you do it as your meditation and you let yourself just be guided.
Yeah.
And I think it's so rich, it's so dense. And like for you, those things are so meaningful. Like it's in some ways, it's your unconscious. You're also, I feel, tapping into the collective.
Right. Okay. So right. So I'm thinking of this. Yeah, I'm thinking of this as a mirror. Okay. So yes, this is very rich and dense for me, and lots of thoughts went through my mind as I did this work. But I also know that by following Colleen and Mary Stein's map of the soul, which is supposedly Jung's map of the soul, I'm also tapping into what's in all of us. And so this piece and any other piece that I've done should speak to everybody in some fascinating way. I mean, it's not that you recognize something in it right away, but it's something that it's hard to look away from. And when you look at this piece angular in light, it's just totally alive. So remember this area here that looks kind of brown down by my signature. And then let me give you okay, so here's at a different angle, and here's the gold that's actually there. It's not brown at all. It's actually yellow gold. And so what happens when you look at this piece in real life is that you never look at it the same way twice. And if you put the right light on it, it's a piece that is just incredibly alive, in my view. I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back as a great artist here. I'm just saying when when I look at it, I see new things in it all the time, but I think everybody would see because of how bright the piece is.
I'd say that no hubris at all there. I mean, it's alive because you're making nature from your nature.
Right.
And I think
And the green represents nature, right?
Yeah, there's no arrogance in that. I think a lot of people don't want to own that they are nature. They're trying to become something. I think what you're doing here is you're simply expressing your nature from the inner nature, and that's, I think, no hubris or arrogance at all. I think you're making life, as it were, visually.
Well, and with respect to that, Jordan, I do take this idea of nature from the Pollock movie, because I never understood Jackson Pollock, okay, when I was younger. Until 1995, I never understood it. I just said, geez, why can't a kindergartner do this? And the answer is that a kindergartner can do it. They just don't know what they're doing.
Well, I think that's a good point. And also, I think then intention is overrated. It's more important the action, the way it comes across. And this is really reminding me of the old Hindu quote of, if God wished to hide, God would hide in man. That is the last place man would look for God.
Right.
And so
Right.
I think everything comes from within. And what's even funnier, I think, is I had a set of 1951 Encyclopedia Britannica years back, and when you got to Nepal, it had an outline of the country, and all it said, and this is it: Nepal, a faraway place.
Yeah.
And
well,
so that inside is far away, when in the reality, it's simply infinite inside, and you just need to walk in. So I think the last place man would look for God is in ourselves.
Right. And I want to highly recommend, I'm going to put onto the YouTube chat the name of this book, which is called Your Brain on Art. And it's a wonderful book, written by at least one Johns Hopkins professor. And they're talking about what's in your brain. And of course, in your brain, you don't have words and images, tucked away in there. But somehow our psyches, when you think of something, like if I pick any word, every word is a symbol. And if I pick any word and say it, everybody's going to have an image.
Your video froze that image.
In their psyche, but inside your brain, all the neurons and everything are more like this. They aren't like a picture. And yet, what this book is talking about is how your brain wires itself so that you actually see that picture in your mind's eye when I say it. A word like a ship. Okay, everybody's got some idea of a ship. Okay, and so those ideas or those images come to your mind, but they don't come to your mind because you have a Rolodex of photographs. They come to your mind because you, at some point, wired your brain so that when you hear that word, you have this image come up. And so I'm going to put the name of the book here and go ahead.
Skip, I also wanted to appreciate your beautiful choice of colors.
Thank you.
Like,
Okay, well,
if
I
that's
wasn't
what
choosing.
yeah. I know, but that's what came. We're very alive, as you said, very rich, pigmented colors. They're not pastel.
Right.
Yeah, and I appreciate you said that, Judith. It's like a
Yeah,
tertiary contrast. It's not, yellow to red to blue.
right.
There's a tertiary deepening of the colors, and they are very vibrant and full of pigment. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that alludes then to the intensity of magma, as it were, in the
Yeah,
unconscious.
I want to show you a different palette. Okay, so here's the big piece that I did before. This was an entirely different palette. Okay, in this piece, I only had 14 usable colors because I don't use black and I don't use white. And so I had 14 colors available to me here. But meanwhile, over Christmas, I bought myself a new watercolor set, and I actually ended up with let's see, 124 different colors, including these colors that are fluorescent. Okay, in other
Mhm.
words, I got a small set of fluorescent colors. I didn't know that that's what I was ordering. I thought it said, get these retro colors. So I said, okay, it was like $5. So I got 24 retro colors, and it turned out they all were fluorescent like this. And then I got just a solid watercolor set that has some fluorescence in it, but it has 100 colors in it. And I got this from an outfit you can find online. It's called Temu. And I think these are colors that come from China, actually. But in any case, I like them, and I like the set that I got, and it was pretty
Oh,
inexpensive.
I've heard of that company. They're like a fortune cookie. You never know what you're gonna get. You just hope you buy something, you open up the package, and it's like surprise.
That's right. It's like that. It is like that.
Skip, how big is this painting in real life?
This piece is 11 by 14.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of going bigger, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. So anyway, it's very meaningful to me for all those reasons which I described at the beginning. And I believe that everyone that looks at this, who's looking at it now, whether now live or now on video, will have an uncontrolled reaction to this piece. I mean, they may hate it. That's a possibility. But it basically is a mirror of everybody's psyche. Would you concur with that, Judith? I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yes, the gazing process that Colleen invites is so helpful.
Yes.
To just let it come to you, to soften your gaze and just keep allowing it. And I just signed up for her 12-week class in art and spirit. And we've just had 2 sessions. So I want to thank you, Skip, for introducing me to her. Feel like it's expanded the Red Book journey.
Yeah. What time of day is she doing that?
10 to 11:30 Pacific on Thursday mornings.
So I can't attend. I can't attend, but I was in communication with Colleen overnight, and her new book, is almost finished. She's expecting to have copies in her hand within a week to 10 days. And so she asked me, and I agreed to that we would do a wisdom path, probably on a Saturday, and I'll invite everybody in my mailing list for that. and it's going to be a very, very powerful session. I'm sure of that. So,
when are you planning on that, Skip?
well, it'll be a Saturday. Last week I got my schedule screwed up because I have to take this praxis test to rubber stamp my teaching certificate in the state of Maryland. So last week I went online at the appointed hour. I was using their browser. I got everything up to speed. I tested my system with their system, and I said, okay, log on for the test. And it comes back and it says, wait for the proctor to come and tell you what to do next. Well, the proctor never showed up. And this is a test that costs $156. And I've been preparing for it for a month. So I'm presumably going to have to do that prep again now sometime and do that test. And I don't know when that will be. But usually we do well if we do our wisdom path on Saturdays. And if I do it at 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, that gets the most people in the world from my mailing list, including people in Japan and so on. And so, so it'll be 11 a.m. Pacific time on some Saturday, as soon as Colleen has the book and I don't have to take my praxis.
Great.
Okay.
And it'll be a couple hours, Skip?
Oh yeah, it'll be at least a couple hours, and I'll ask Tim Holmes to host it with me, and it'll be a sweet session, I'm sure, because of course all of us that know Colleen fairly well love her, and then the work is incredible. I mean, she did a chapter which I'm pushing to get her to send to the talking heads, or maybe I will do, which is on the shadow. And it is a brilliant discussion of the shadow and how it works in politics. And all the talking heads for years have been saying, why is this happening? Why is everybody following this guy who's a total brigand and, a criminal, or at least accused of 91 felonies? Why does everybody want this guy to be president of the United States? And Colleen has explained it precisely in this chapter. It's really good. And I mean, even people like Rachel Maddow, who's pretty smart, can't figure it out. And so it's going to be an important session for sure.
So I wonder if he's
she gave that chapter as a handout for this 12-week class.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Right. Okay, so we're on Redbook, we're on Scrutinies. We should get started on that. And I'm glad to hear from Art that the sound is better. I did some fiddling internally. And let's see. Kathy says, good morning. I love the colors and the flow of your recent painting. Richard says, I'll say yes, that's how my brain feels at all times. Okay. So anyway, all right. So good morning, everyone. We are now going to get into the second part of Scrutinies. I'm going to take a step back one page so that we begin with Jung's self-criticism. And in footnote number 10, footnote number 10 for this section, which the footnote comes at the beginning of the second paragraph. It gives the date of May 8th, 1914. And Shamdasani says there's a gap in the entries in the Black Book 5 between April 21st and May 8th. So the discussion referred to in the previous paragraph do not appear to have been recorded. All right. And there's one other footnote that I should read. Jung later described the self-criticism depicted in this opening section as the confrontation with the shadow. In 1934, he wrote, "Whoever looks into the mirror of the water will see first his own image. Whoever goes to himself risks a confrontation with himself. The mirror does not flatter. It faithfully shows whatever looks into it. Namely, the face we never show to the world because we cover it with the persona, the mask of the actor. But the mirror lies behind the mask. It shows the true face. This confrontation is the first test of courage on the inner way, a test sufficient to frighten off most people. For the meeting with ourselves belongs to the more unpleasant things that can be avoided as long as one can project everything negative into the environment. But if we are able to see our own shadow and can bear knowing about it, then a small part of the problem has already been solved. We have at least brought up the personal unconscious." And this is from On the Archetypes of the Collective Unconscious, Collected Works 9-1, paragraphs 43 and 44. Now, I just mentioned, going back to the painting that I was talking about, this is what I'm saying, that these images that I'm doing are like mirrors in this sense. They are mirrors, and that if you gaze into the mirror gazes back at you, right? As Jordan has it, right? And
But if you gaze too long, the mirror will lean forward and say it's really rude to stare.
okay. Well, but the point being that in these pieces that I'm working on, you're seeing yourself. You're not seeing me when you're looking at these pieces. You're because I'm not putting my persona there. I'm saying this is how my unconscious, in this period of time from January 7th to yesterday, in this period of time, this is what my unconscious looks like to me. Okay. But for you, it's a mirror because you're going to project your stuff onto this image.
I would say also that instead of persona or not persona, because it's not persona, I would then lose persona and just simply say that the substance or the surface is generated by the substance. Therefore, it's the natural skin, the visual appearance of the substance, but not a Halloween mask persona thing. And so then again, your inner nature is simply expressed.
Yeah.
Instead of not thing, it stays its own thing.
Yeah. And so what Jackson Pollock said in the movie, Lee Krasner confronts him, and he is doing a painting on a wall at that point in the movie. And she says to Jackson, you have to refer to something in nature. And Pollock says, I am nature. And as I was saying, I never understood Pollock until probably the last 7-8 years, because I had had that experience in 1995 of walking into the Boston Museum and seeing number 31 in reality, the actual piece, and it's quite large, and beginning to weep uncontrollably. I didn't know what was happening. Now I understand it. Now there was a direct communication between Jackson Pollock's unconscious and my unconscious, not passing go, not passing the fact that Jackson Pollock had been dead for 40 years by the time I saw the piece. It didn't matter. From the grave, his unconscious communicated to my unconscious. And it took me 20 years to work out what that experience meant. And it was only when I was describing it in one of these classes in 2016, one of my colleagues said, olive drab. And oh my God, he got me. It hit me exactly what it was about. And it was about the fact that I had never mourned my best friend, or not properly mourned him, who was killed in Vietnam on April the 11th, 1969. And so, but so that communication with great artists is what is happening. And, I kept hearing, I was raised up through a very rational path. Okay, I was a Marine Corps officer in Vietnam, and then I went to business school, I went to law school, and I practiced law for 5 years. So everything was very logic. Everything is rational. And I'd never heard anything about the irrational before I was maybe 45 or so. And so this is all revelation for me in my later life that, oh my God, I've been missing all this all along. And so, all right. But anyway, and so here's Jung. He's going through this, and maybe he's a little critical of himself. He's written this much of the book. So about 80% of the book is written. And now he's going back and saying, now, wait a minute. Okay. And we miss about a 3-week stretch in there where he didn't put anything in the black book. And then here's what he says.
Well, right before you go, I appreciate that you brought up rational, and irrational never came up unless it was an
I'm sorry, what page?
Go ahead, say it again.
Judith?
What page are you reading from?
I'm reading from page 467 of the Reader's Edition of the Red Book by C.G. Jung. That's where we are. Okay. And
so irrational never came up unless it was an insult. You're being irrational, in quote, in parentheses, meaning stop it. You're being anti-intellectual. And then people would turn around and say, art drives culture. Technology simply supports it. And technology is wholly rational, typically. And what happens is it's speaking out of both sides of the mouth, where there's a code of, don't be irrational, but you should be irrational. Here, do this art. It's of value. Except then when you do the art, then, well, don't do that. What are you going to do with it? And that's where I came up with reasons are often wholly unreasonable. They're just a snapshot of the irrational, the art, the living nature that you were just showing in the painting. Now that painting, the picture, that's now a rational visual. I see it. I don't need to make it intelligible. I can fully experience it in the physical real. And that's rational. And I think there's been a body denial of make it all thinking. But oh boy, look at the forbidden fruit of the body. God forbid you enjoy yourself.
And point of fact, everything is irrational. Everything we do is irrational, actually. Right.
and
I mean,
I
the
love
rational stuff is all the railroad tracks we're required to live our lives on, right? The railroad tracks of the law and, the rule of law. We keep hearing about the rule of law, but we have the rule of law because the laws are railroad tracks that we use to hold culture together,
yeah.
to hold society together so that we can live.
And I love Viktor Frankl, but the one quote where the person who cannot find a deep meaning in life loses themselves in pleasure. And I always flip that and say, sure, but the person who cannot find erotic, vital pleasure in just living loses themselves in too much meaning.
Right, right. Right. And so, the thought of the words City of Gold for me is just an anchor that I had in my unconscious, right? I'm looking at these lines of gold fluorescent paint, and it it was enough of an anchor, enough of a connection to reading that book that I thought of City of Gold. And then I made all these other associations down to the fact that, oh my God, this is the City of Gold is actually in us, in here. Uh, it's not outside. And so, all these movies, Indiana Jones and National Treasure, etc., are looking in the wrong place, and that's what we have to understand. It seems to me that's what we have to understand as a society.
Well, they
And
always have some place on the map that's cut out or is rotted, and they have to make this, intuitive jump, and
right,
that's going inside to complete the map outside.
right,
So,
yeah, precisely. So anyway, Jung is criticizing himself because, maybe he's thinking that this means something to others beyond himself or something. He's getting a little bit of an arrogance. I mean, and in a sense, this whole discussion for the last 45 minutes has been somewhat prideful. I mean, I like that painting and I like showing it to people. And there's pleasure in being prideful. And as my touched Pennsylvania Dutch ancestors would turn over their grave if they heard me talking about it, because it's hochmedig to talk about yourself that way. I mean, they didn't even wear buttons. They wore snaps and eyes on their clothes.
no, that's a really important thing, because Colleen's last step is to share. And the thing is, it's unfortunate that so many people need permission to have a voice,
Right.
and they're sitting quiet. And granted, I talk too much, but at the same time, there's that piece of you brought from the unconscious, personal and collective,
Yeah.
something in only the way that you can. And
Right.
so you share it, they will see familiar things differently, or
Sure.
at least have the opportunity to. And I think in that it's maybe from a Pennsylvania Dutch perspective, it's prideful, but from the living perspective, that's vital.
Well, and I'm a teacher. It was a little bit surprising in Confluence 22 when Tim put as career path, um, my career path, executive and teacher, because I wasn't a teacher at that time, right? And I only became an actual school teacher after that. I mean, I have
Right.
been a teacher here and there over the years, but that was never my primary career path, I didn't think. But now looking back, I have to say, yes, it has been. So All right, so reading Jung now. After I had spoken these words and many more angry words to my eye, I noticed that I began to bear being alone with myself. But the touchiness still stirred in me frequently, and I had to lash myself just as often. And I did this until even the pleasure of in self-torment faded. Then I heard a voice one night. It came from afar and was the voice of my soul. She spoke. How distant you are. I. Is that you, my soul? From which height and distance do you speak? Soul. I am above you. I am a world apart. I have become sun-like. I received the seeds of fire. Where are you? I can hardly find you in your mists. I am down on the murky earth, in the dark smoke that the fire left us, and my gaze does not reach you, but your voice sounds closer. Soul. I feel it. The heaviness of the earth penetrates me. Damp cold enshrouds me. Gloomy memories of former pain overcome me. I. Do not lower yourself into the smoke and the darkness of the earth. I would like that which I am still working on to remain sunlight. Otherwise, I will lose the courage to live further down in the darkness of the earth. Let me just hear your voice. I will never want to see you in the flesh again. Say something. Take it from the depths, from which fear perhaps flows to me. Soul. I cannot, since your creative source flows from there. You see my uncertainty. Soul. The uncertain way is the good way. Upon it lie possibilities. Be unwavering and create. I heard the rushing of wings. I knew that the bird rose higher above the clouds in the fiery brilliance of the outspread Godhead. Quote, I turned to my brother the eye. He stood sadly and looked at the ground and sighed, and would rather have been dead, since the burden of enormous suffering burdened him. But a voice spoke from me and said, quote, it is hard. The sacrifice fall left and right, and you will be crucified for the sake of life. Unquote. And I said to my eye, my brother, how do you like this speech? Unquote. But he sighed deeply and moaned, it is bitter and I suffer much. Unquote. To which I answered, quote, I know, but it is not to be altered. But I did not know what that was, since I still did not know what the future held. Parentheses, this happened on the 21st of May of the year 1914. Close parentheses. In the excess of suffering, I looked up to the clouds and called out to my soul and asked her, and I heard her voice, happy and bright. And she answered, quote, much happiness has happened to me. I rise higher, my wings grow. Unquote. I was seized with bitterness at these words, and I cried, quote, you live from the blood of the human heart, unquote. I heard her laughing, or was she not laughing? No drink is dearer to me than red blood, unquote. Powerless anger seized me, and I called out, if you were not my soul who followed the God to the eternal realm, I would call you the most terrible scourge of men. But who moves you? I know that divinity is not humanity. The divine consumes the human. I know that this is the severity. This is the cruelty. He who has felt you with his hands can never remove the blood from his hands. I have become enslaved to you. She answered, do not be angry. Do not complain. Let the bloody victims fall at your side. It is not your severity. It is not your cruelty, but necessity. The way of life is sown with fallen ones, unquote. I, yes, I see it as a battlefield. My brother, what is with you? Are you groaning? Then my I answered, why should I not groan and moan? I load myself with the dead and cannot haul their number, unquote. But I did not understand my I and therefore spoke to him, quote, you are a pagan, my friend. Have you not heard that it is said, let the dead bury their dead? Unquote. Why do you want to be burdened with the dead? You do not help them by hauling them. Unquote. Then my eye wailed, but I pity the poor fallen ones. They cannot reach the light. Perhaps if I haul them, question mark. Close quote. I, quote, what is this? Their souls accomplished as much as they could. Then they encountered fate. It will also happen to us. Your compassion is sick, unquote. And there's a reference here to Matthew 8:21-22, quote, and another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said unto him, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. Reading on. But my soul called from afar, quote, leave him compassion. Compassion binds life and death, unquote. These words of my soul stung me. She spoke of compassion. She who rose up following the God without compassion. And I asked her, quote, why did you do that? And there's a footnote, May 23rd, 1914. Why did you do that? For my human sensitivity could not grasp the hideousness of that hour. She answered, quote, it is not meant for me to be in your world. I besmirch myself on the excrement of your earth, unquote. I, quote, I am not earth. Am I not excrement? Did I commit an error that forced you to follow the God into the upper realms? Question mark, unquote. Soul, quote, no, it was inner necessity. I belong to the above. I, has no one suffered an irreplaceable loss through your disappearance? Soul, on the contrary, you have enjoyed utmost benefit. I, if I heed my human feeling about this, doubt would come over me. Soul, what have you noticed? Why should what you see always be untrue? It is your particular wrong that you cannot stop making a fool of yourself. Can you not remain on your way for once? Can you not remain on your way for once? You know that I doubt because of my love for men. Soul, no, for the sake of your weakness, for the sake of your doubt and disbelief. Stay on your way and do not run away from yourself. There is a divine and a human intention. They cross each other in stupid and God-forsaken people, to whom you also belong from time to time. Unquote. Since what my soul spoke about referred to nothing that I could see, nor could I see what I suffered from, since this happened 2 months before the outbreak of the war, I wanted to understand it all as personal experiences within me, and consequently I could never understand nor believe it at all, since my belief is weak, and I believe that it is better for our time if belief is weak. We have outgrown that childhood where mere belief was the most suitable means to bring men to what is good and reasonable. Therefore, if we wanted to have a strong belief again today, we would thus return to that earlier childhood. But we have so much knowledge and such a thirst for knowledge in us that we need knowledge more than belief. But the strength of belief would hinder us from attaining knowledge. Belief certainly may be something strong, but it is empty, and too little of the whole man can be involved. If our life with God is grounded only on belief, should we simply believe first and foremost? That seems too cheap to me. Men who have understanding should not just believe, but should wrestle for knowledge to the best of their ability. Belief is not everything, but neither is knowledge. Belief does not give us the security and the wealth of knowing. Desiring knowledge sometimes takes away too much belief. Both must strike a balance. I've been reading a long time here. Is there any comment?
Yeah, I think it's important here. He's moving from the desperate isolation of loneliness to the connection present in solitude. And I think then in that sense, in a bigger picture, faith precludes belief. Faith has no need of belief. Belief is facts and experience. Belief has no need of faith. So in a sense, if we transpose faith to art and belief to reason, there's the balance to strike between the irrational and the rational. And I don't know in which text he wrote it, but he said, man does not move, the psyche does not move from right and wrong. It moves from sense to nonsense. And I think that's an important distinction here with faith and belief.
Yeah, he said it here in the Red Book. And maybe this is the insight that Jesus Christ had, okay, that he knew what would happen to him, but he also knew what would happen to him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's both.
He knew what would happen to him small age, but he knew what would happen to him large age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
And I think the inflection on how that's presented is important.
Right.
I find it interesting because his soul is a she and not a he or a they. I'm not sure if maybe it was the way that it was translated from the original language, from the original text into the English language as the soul being a she because of psyche, or if going back to mythology, or if he's simply not really into that whole Oedipus complex and doesn't necessarily feel so competitive with his father, being that there was so much misunderstanding before the First World War. I think there was the Union, which happened before the United Nations took place. Some countries wanted to form a union together, and many of the other countries disagreed because it was there were a lot of geographical issues with some of the ethnic minorities, so they disagreed. But and I'm just comparing his father's time to his time, and I don't know anything about his father, but I'm saying, from his cohort, historically, within the historical context, given the events that took place at that time, there's no Oedipus complex here that I see in Jung.
Yeah, his father at this point has been dead for a decade.
Well, and the Oedipus complex too is it's a good point you bring up, because what happens is the true Oedipal complex has nothing to do with the father and the mother. It has to do with the child not becoming the parent of the adult and never leaving home. You're still sheltered and basically pampered instead of going out and not losing kindness and beauty by, going out into the world. So I think that your point is well made. And I think what's interesting about, I don't know so much about if it's about translation. I think it's the inner wisdom, which is Sophia, or previously translated Chokhmah in the Hebrew, and that becomes then the divine feminine, which then if you jump into even the concept of God is Shekinah, so which is the female godhead, or Juno, which is the mother of heaven. So it's interesting all the back and forth between male and female. And honestly, take Odin in the Norse, he's really Freya. So I laugh that, if you say Odin, you're really talking about a chick. But if a woman, but if you say Freya, then you're also talking about Odin. And so you get a both. And I think when he's pulling the soul in here with a voice, he's giving voice to that divine feminine, which is the generative quality of the psyche. Doesn't have really much to do with female, that we all have that kind of inner place of creation.
Yeah, we're not in masculine and feminine here. We are not talking about genitalia. Okay.
Right.
We're not talking about our roles in reproduction. We are talking about the psyche and the duality within the psyche. And so, we've all been brainwashed by this masculine approach, this logical, rational approach that came to us in the middle of the 15th century, where everything became based on the scientific method and we can prove everything. Well, actually, we can't. And, there's a great question in the movie Contact where Matthew McConaughey says to Jodie Foster, did you love your father? And she says, well, of course I love my father. And he says, prove it. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the point. And in the end of the movie Contact, when she has had this revelation being dropped through this machine, and it only took a fraction of a second, but she lived 18 hours, and she says she can't prove it, right? And then,
what was the movie called again?
Contact.
Oh,
with Jodie Foster.
The Alien movie?
Yeah. Well, it's not called Aliens. It's called Contact, but it's a movie about first contact through radio telescopes.
Well, and it reminds me of the quote, and people, these days, crack level addiction to reason, and proving, and everyone's got to be in conflict, and conflict has nothing to do with being strong. Honestly, it usually has to do with being weak, and because you get drawn into something rather than doing something. But the quote of people say, well, trust the science. Well, trust the science is the most unscientific statement in the world, because science is all about questioning the science. So it's interesting about the rational piece of the rational science, where scientists are always trying to, debunk and bunk their own stuff, just to see if it's, it's like kicking the tires, just to see if it's worth anything.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to go back to the way that I observed the literature. So he's saying no, for the soul is saying, the psyche is saying no, for the sake of your weakness, for the sake of your doubt and disbelief, stay on your way and do not run away from yourself. So for me, again, it's going back to love and unity. And so he has this marriage of himself, marriage of the who he is. Again, he's still on the road of self-discovery because he's experiencing his life while also experiencing death all around him. And so there is day and there is night, and there is life and there is death. And so he has this life instinct which is driving him through creating things, and then the death instinct, which is sort of this like he's being very dysregulated, and I hate to use psychological terms, but being a little manic, I would say. Having these bouts of he's okay, he's writing, he's very into his study, he's writing these myths, and then all of a sudden he has this revelation where he has gone too far in his conscious mind, in that mind where he's writing and thinking, and then it becomes his reality, and now he has to face his reality, and at the same time he's meditating within himself and trying to understand the world around him again. And he did mention childhood. We would thus return to that earlier childhood knowledge and such thirst for knowledge. We need more than belief. Belief would hinder us from attaining knowledge. So he is questioning this existential, where is my knowledge coming from? From my belief? Is what I believe my knowledge? Or is, what is the relationship between the knowledge and the belief and the self? So it's a journey that he's going through.
Yeah. And Kathy asks a good question here. How do you prove love? And my response was by sharing your own love. And Kathy says, yes, that has me smiling. And so I'll give you an example just in terms of this very program, and I'm sure this applies to Jordan and to Amela as well, which is that we're communicating live with people that we don't know. We know many names, but we don't know these people, and there are many hundreds of people that follow these videos after we've presented these, and we have no clue who those are. Typically, they may be people who are living on the other side of the world, and our time is, and their time is not our time. And so for me, and I think for the two of you, and perhaps for all of us that are listening live, this is a labor of love. And you don't have to believe me. It's, we don't charge anything for this. And we're just doing it. And you either know that that's the case or you believe it, but there's nothing that I can say that will make you believe it. You have to know it for yourself. And if I started to proselytize by trying to make you believe it in some way, it would lose its power, I think. And so anyway,
love, I have the pyramid of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that's right next to belonging. So for me, love is primitive, but also a stepping stone into self-actualization.
Sure. And
Part of that's reciprocality, because you're going to hear something maybe that, may cross-check you into the hockey blue line wall hard enough for your helmet to shatter the glass, but you go, thank you, nice contact. I mean, it's like, because they see you. It's not an abandonment. Oh my, something's wrong. No. They're telling you the truth. And
right.
there's love in that kind of reciprocality, because then that's a safety place where someone can actually go in with full natural intensity, make a comment about you, and it's not an insult. It's the truth. And that's there's a belonging there, that's capital B, where I think
Right.
love is living of the reciprocality than an amorous troubadour kind of romantic thing. It's bigger.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
so
Greeks were right. The Greeks were right in having many different forms of love, because I think that's the key right there.
Yeah, erotic, storge, filial. I mean, you get the whole distinction of, well, you need context. Otherwise, what are you talking about?
There's your answer. It's the Greeks.
yeah, and keep in mind, love is not the opposite of love is not hate, as Jung pointed out, because we actually love our hate. Okay, so if certain people are bigoted, they love being bigoted. They love what they're doing, right? And so hate is not the opposite of love, but power is, as Jung called it, the power devil. And so anyway, let us read on. But it is also dangerous to believe too much, because today everyone has to find his own way and encounters him in himself a beyond full of strange and mighty things. He could easily take everything literally with too much belief and would be nothing but a lunatic. The childishness of belief breaks down in the face of our present necessities. We need differentiating language to clear up the confusion which the discovery of the soul has brought in. Therefore, it is perhaps much better to await better knowledge before one accepts things all too believingly. From this consideration, I spoke to my soul, quote, "Is all that to be accepted? You know in what sense I ask this. It is not stupid and unbelieving to ask this, but is doubting of a higher type." To this she answered, "I understand you, but it is to be accepted." And there's a footnote here. These last two paragraphs do not occur in the Black Book. In Transformations and Symbols of the Libido, Jung wrote, "I think belief should be replaced by understanding." And this is Collected Works B, paragraph 356. On October 5th, 1945, exactly 1 year before I was born, Jung wrote to Victor White, "I began my career with repudiating everything that smelt of belief." And just and so, my career my real career in this stuff began when my daughter said I was going to hell, and I had this visionary experience of Mephistopheles visiting me, and realizing that it wasn't about belief, it was about knowing. But I could only have known what I was experiencing by having already read and understood Jung for more than a decade at that point. Otherwise, I might easily have gone in the ditch. Okay, so to which I replied, the solitude of this acceptance terrifies me. I dread the madness that befalls the solitary. She answered, quote, as you already know, I have long predicted solitude for you. You need not be afraid of madness. What I predict is valid, unquote. Now, I'd just like to make a comment at this point that I think Jung is, at this point in time, he's coming to the realization of how much work he had to do. Okay. Coming to the realization of what his life's work had to be. And from this point of view, in May of 1914, it's enormous. It's 47 years of writing, which he ultimately did. But he's seen the he's having a vision, in effect, of the sacrifices that he's going to have to make in his life in order to accomplish his life's work. What he's called to do is coming to his consciousness at this time, I think. And I think that this dialogue here is, in essence, realizing the sacrifice he would have to make, which was indeed the sacrifice of his very life, in the same sense as Jesus Christ, in the very same sense.
Mhm.
I mean, Jesus Christ recognized what he had to do and did it. But Jung is having this sort of the same revelation that he would have to sacrifice his entire life in order to say the things that he had to say.
Yeah, we need differentiating knowledge to clear up the confusion which the discovery of the soul brought in. So he's again going into the letting go of oneself. And when he was comparing the golden flower, and a few chapters ago, and and when I was reading that, a lot of stuff came to mind. I had to pause because, for one thing, I was thinking about, and then when you brought up again what your daughter had said to you, that you're going to hell, things we say the darnest things, to our parents. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you can't be too offended by it, because wherever you go, there you are,
Well,
but who
yeah,
else is there with you? But who else? You'll never know. You never know who you're gonna meet there.
yeah.
Because maybe someone is also lost or confused or didn't realize, how much they've maximized their sin credit.
Yeah, that's right. And at the time I was at the time I was very down on fundamentalist Christianity, because I said, who teaches a child to say such a thing to their parent? Okay. And yet that experience literally forced me into hell for about a decade. It was not an easy task to work my way out of it. Okay. And, that sort of experience can easily cause estrangement between a parent and a child, very easily. And yet my daughter and I seem to have worked through it now. And not consciously, because I never discussed this with her consciously. I don't want to have a rational discussion with her, because then I'm imposing upon the relationship my belief as opposed to her belief. And that is not what is appropriate. I mean, what I have to do, and she has to do, is to know that I love her, and I think that she loves me, and so, that's all that's necessary. And I don't have to make points about that event, not at all. Okay, I don't.
Yeah, and that love lives things into being instead of talking about them all the damn time. People have people are, where are we? Where are we? It's like relationships are like kids in the back seat on a road trip. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And
Mhm.
that to me is just fear of abandonment and a lot of other things that conflict stirs up trouble. Instead of conflict means we're interacting intensely. And,
Yeah.
it's not someone's going to run away, but the whole thing of, are you in a relationship or are you having a relationship conversation? And a lot of people have relationship conversations instead of relationships. Always, are we there yet? Are we there yet? You got to
Yeah.
live it into being. You can't always be, what's my grade? You're no longer in school. You and your daughter living things together. You both understand the past.
Right.
You both have your own perspective of it. But the fact that the true repair is the continuation.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I'm not going to go into it any further, but it's absolutely true what I said, that it's not a question of what I believe or what she believes. Okay, it's what we know, and that is inexpressible in the same sense that the word love is inexpressible. Okay.
It's
Okay.
actionable. Express it, you act it.
Right.
We all children do something that upsets their parent, and they'll take it sometimes for a year, 10 years, or they'll take it with them to the grave. And one thing that I think my mom is going to take to her grave is when I told her, because again, it's against the religion to get a tattoo. And I said to her, Mom, just to let you know, I'm going to get X amount of money. And the first thing I'm going to do with that X amount of money is get a tattoo. Oh my God, if you get a tattoo, you're going to look like a cow. You're going to be part of this.
Wow.
Amela, we had a break in the reliability of the internet when you said it's against the religion too, and then we lost you.
No.
So could you say what you said after that?
Sometimes it ends up on YouTube anyway, but
Oh, okay.
But I said that my mother, she became upset because I had told her that when I get my paycheck, that the first thing I was going to do with my first paycheck was get a tattoo. And she made fun of me. She said, "You're going to brand yourself like a cow." And I said, well, no, because, part of your Moroccan ancestry, warrior women and leader women, they would have tattoos on their face, and I'm not getting a tattoo on my face. And she's like, I will never talk to you again. So now, ever since I told her that, now she just gives me this look that I've never seen before, that she looks at only strangers when she's in disgust or something, like just this face that I've never in my whole life of being her child that I have ever seen. She gives me this face. So it happens, you're one of the lucky ones. You can do that.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, let me continue here. These words filled me with disquiet, since I felt that I could almost not accept that my soul predicted what my soul predicted, because I did not understand it. I always wanted to understand it with regard to myself. Therefore, I said to my soul, quote, what misunderstood fear torments me, unquote. Quote, that is your disbelief, your doubt. You do not want to believe in the size of the sacrifice that is required, but it will go on to the bitter end. Greatness requires greatness. You still want to be too cheap. Did I not speak to you of abandonment, of leaving be? Do you want to have it better than other men? Response, quote, no, I replied. No, that is not it. But I fear committing an injustice to men if I go my own way, unquote. Quote, what do you want to avoid? She said. There is no avoidance. You must go your way, unconcerned about others. No matter whether they are good or bad, you have laid your hand on the divine, which those have not, unquote. I could not accept these words since I feared deception. Therefore, I also did not want to accept this way that forced me into dialogue with my soul. I preferred to speak with men, but I felt compelled toward solitude, and I feared at the same time the solitude of my thinking, which departed from accustomed paths. As I pondered this, my soul spoke to me, quote, did I not predict dark solitude for you? Unquote. I know, I answered, but I did not really think that it would happen. Must it be so? You could, response, you could only say this. You could only say yes. There is nothing to do other than for you to take care of your cause. If anything should happen, it can only happen on this way. So it is hopeless, I cried, to resist solitude. It is utterly hopeless. You should be forced into your work. As my soul spoke this, an old man with a white beard and a haggard face approached me. I asked him what he wanted with me, to which he replied, quote, I am a nameless one of the many who lived and died in solitude. The spirit of the times and the acknowledged truth required this from us. Look at me. You must learn this. Things have been too good for you. But, I replied, is this another necessity in our so very different time? It is as true today as it was yesterday. Never forget that you are a man and therefore you must bleed for the goal of humanity. Practice solitude assiduously without grumbling so that everything will in time become ready. You should become serious and hence take your leave from science. There is too much childishness in it. Your way goes toward the depths. Science is too superficial. Mere language, mere tools. But you must set to work. Quote, I did not know what work was mine, since everything was dark and everything became heavy and doubtful, and an endless sadness seized me, and lasted for many days. Then one night, I heard the voice of an old man. He spoke slowly, heavily, and his sentences appeared to be disconnected and terribly absurd, so that the fear of madness seized me again. For he spoke the following words, quote, it is not the evening of days, the worst comes last. The hand that strikes first strikes best. Nonsense streams from the deepest wells, amply like the Nile. Morning is more beautiful than night. Flowers smell until they fade. Ripeness comes as late as possible in spring, or else it misses its purpose. These sentences that the old man spoke to me on the night of 25 May of the year 1914 appeared to me dreadfully meaningless. I felt my my eye squirm in pain. It moaned and it wailed about the burden of the dead that rested on it. It seemed as if it had to carry 1,000 dead. This sadness did not leave until the 24th of June, 1914. In the night, my soul spoke to me, quote, "The greatest comes to the smallest," unquote. After this, nothing further was said, and then the war broke out. This opened my eyes about what I had experienced before, and it also gave me the courage to say all of that which I have written in the earlier part of this book. Comments, Jordan?
I like that he comes to conclude this section with greatest comes to the smallest, and that largeness of the sadness that came and went. Because this opened my eyes about what I had experienced before. It also gave me the courage to say all of that which I've written in the earlier part of this book. But what's interesting is, in addition, I think, to coming to all the work that's going to come after this, even though he has lots of words, he understands the poison of too many words and the magic of the right droplets of words. And so, a paragraph, in a sense, being the droplet of a whole universe of an idea. These sentences that the old man spoke to me on the night of May 25 May 1914 appeared to me, keyword appeared to me, dreadfully meaningless. And the eye squirming in pain, I think he's hatching from his expectations, from his blind spots, from the I have to prove it, I have to explain it, I have to express it, I have to make sense of it. He's starting to realize how to lift things into being and, in a sense, record them with, in a sense, he's making a diary entry, as it were. It's just not, just not like a standard diary. He's recording things pretty much in full, and it's amazing that the sadness continued till XYZ date. That he can pin when the emotion came and the emotion went, just like I can look out the window and say, "Oh, it's daytime." And I think there's a clarity, of his inner workings where he's like, "No, I'm really sad right now." But you don't look sad. He's like, "I don't need to look sad." That's explanation. He's feeling. But then when that goes away, he pins a date on it, which in one way is absurd, and the other way is quite self-aware.
Righto. Any comment, Amela?
Yes. I mean, he's really giving. There's this back and forth between Jung and his psyche, and as you're reading out loud the text, what came to my mind was, oh my God, which archetype did Jung meet for him to really go at it with his psyche?
Yeah, that's funny you say that. It's like a professional boxing match. I mean, and it's interesting to me too. I remember the first time I read this, is this fabricated? Is this grandiosity? He's writing this, so he must be creating these characters. But it's interesting that the voices are almost predictable, except he does infuse a wisdom that is beyond self-reflection. And there's not an if then. He's getting his butt kicked, and he's recording it, blow by blow.
So there's a footnote here Here's the sentence. This sadness just did not leave until June the 24th, 1914. And the footnote reads, "Ha, this book. I have laid hands on you again, banal and pathological and frantic and divine, my written unconscious. I have forced me to my knees again. Here I am. Say what you have to say. This is the one reference to the unconscious in the Black Books 2-7. Okay, so it's only in Black Books 2-7, this is the only time that he refers to the unconscious. And then I'll read on, but in the fourth line of the next paragraph, it says June 3rd, 1915. So he didn't write again for a year, okay? And June 3rd, 1915, so nearly a year later. In the interim, Jung wrote the draft of the preceding books of Liber Novus. On July 28th, 1914, Jung gave a talk on the importance of the unconscious in psychopathology at a meeting of the British Medical Association in Aberdeen, Scotland. From around August 9th to around August 22nd, Jung was on military service in Luzerne for 14 days. From around January 1 to around March 8th, 1915, Jung was on military service in Olten for 64 days. Between March 10th and 12th, he served on the invalid transport. And this is from Jung's military service books. And so, anyway, let me read ahead a footnote also. September 14th, 1915. In late summer, so now we're 13 months into World War I. In late summer and autumn of 1915, Jung conducted his correspondence with Hans Schmidt on the question of psychological types. His concluding letter to Schmidt on November 6th indicates a shift that signals a return to the elaboration of his fantasies in the Black Books. Understanding is a terribly blinding power, possibly a veritable soul murder when it levels out vitally important differences. The core of the individual is a mystery of life, which dies when it is grasped. That is also why symbols want to keep their secrets. They are mysterious not only because we are unable to clearly see what it is at their bottom. All understanding as such being an integration into general viewpoints contains the devil's element and kills. That is why in the later stages of analysis, we must help the other to come to those hidden and unopenable symbols in which the seed of life lies securely hidden like the tender seed in the hard shell. Actually, there must not be any understanding and agreement on this, even if it were possible, as it were. But if understanding and agreement on this has become generalized and obviously possible, the symbol is ripe for destruction because it no longer covers the seed, which is about to outgrow the shell. Now I understand a dream I once had, and which greatly impressed me. I was standing in my garden, and I had dug open a rich spring of water which gushed forth mightily. Then I had to dig a trench and a deep hole in which I collected all the water and let it flow back into the depths of the earth again. In this way, salvation is given to us in the unopenable and unsayable symbol, for it protects us by preventing the devil from swallowing the seed of life. And, okay, so
Keeping life flowing. I mean, the living things into being. I
right.
discovered this well. What great water pressure. And then instead of hoarding it, he turned it back into the earth so he can use it while it's passing through, just like the dash of life.
Yeah, and I mean, basically, this is what I'm experiencing with these paintings that I'm getting. I mean, if I can tell you a few things that come to mind, but as a symbol of what's happening for me, I couldn't possibly describe it. It's a symbol, and it's mysterious both to me and to any viewer. And it's a symbol of what is within everyone. So when earlier in this program I referred to the mirror, I'm only saying, this is within all of us. And if you start to find it, then it's very powerful, uh, and and obviously useful to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can I also know very quickly that later because of the military relationship and the discussion for the psychological types, I think it was in 1944 was the republication of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. No, it was the Briggs-Myers type indicator handbook. It was published in 1944. And then the Myers-Briggs type indicator in 1956. And then the MBTI manual in 1962. So Jung inspired a whole aisle of can of worms.
Right, and I'm doing the same thing because next Thursday I'm giving a 1 hour lecture to our students who are 6th to 9th graders on the MBTI. Probably it's only the 6th to 8th graders. And of course, when you take even a modest presentation of the MBTI, what they train you to do from the Institute, it takes a whole day to do. And so trying to do it in 1 hour is just going to be a tiptoe across the mountaintops. But nonetheless, just to put in the kids' minds that there is something there seems to me interesting. And it's been postponed twice, but I think next Thursday it's going to go for real. So anyway.
I think what's interesting about that is, one, not getting too attached to one's MBTI type, but understanding that that's kind of like, oh, that's my driver's license. I got a class, whatever with no restrictions, and but I can't drive an 18-wheeler, and it's not a motorcycle license.
Right.
It's just for an automobile. But in that sense, what comes to mind is a lot of people get the MBTI, and that's the death of their personality. I'm this, it's because of this. It's like, oh, I did that because I'm a Scorpio. It's like, oh my Lord. It's like everyone's going to flip the blame to, you got to deal with that. But there's a certain death in that. And I find that in that regard, there are worse things than dying. And one of those is living as a slave. And so what happens is, in that sense, the knowledge within the MBTI can be some power.
Yeah.
It can give you some insight to, oh, that's some gas in my tank. You can also say, not so much. And then you brace against it, you're still utilizing it. So, I think it's interesting that it seemed as if I had to carry 1,000 dead, he says. Well, let them go. You don't need all those expectations. Live.
As I was reading that passage, I was thinking of our current affairs and all the unfortunate deaths that are occurring in Palestine right now and in Ukraine right now.
And in
And pardon?
and Saudi Yemen, Yemen, Yemen.
Oh, and
The UK.
Yemen, yeah. Yep,
I mean,
and
it's
Yemen.
it's like everywhere, but here. I mean, we have our own drug deaths here.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about Jung's perspective in here, in which, there is so much blood in the Red Book. And yet he is able to sort of, in some sense, explain away all these deaths that yes, they're unfortunate, but unfortunately, that's the way it is. That's the way the world works.
Mm.
And it reminds me of the title of the movie, There Will Be Blood. Okay, that things happen because of deaths.
And James Hillman's, Incredible Love of War title.
Yeah,
All the conflict in our dreams. We
right.
bring, like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. And I had a kid this week who was describing to me his favorite thing is to watch YouTube videos of Mexican cartels mutilating the bodies of little children.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and and so that's a terrible love, and that's um,
Wow.
well, it's not mental. It's not. I don't think it's per se a mental health issue, though. It's that the dark side is in control of this kid, and somehow we need to show him the light. We have to find a way.
I don't know where he finds those videos, because the last time I tried to find a video, or at least the one that YouTube suggested to me, was a guy who said, now you will see what price you have to pay from the cartel. And I thought he was gonna, but he ended up taking a toothbrush and brushing her teeth, and she was screaming in pain and agony. He's like, after this, we're gonna floss your teeth. And I'm like, what is going on here? I'm like, well, thanks, YouTube. At least I don't have to see any gore.
Right.
I'm like, how does the Mexican cartel punish people? And it was like, but I don't know, maybe he got there from researching Ecuador. I don't know, you got to probe.
Yeah. So Kathy has asked, oh my God, MBTI, how do I do that? Kathy, there are some MBTI abbreviated tests online that are free. If you want to take the full battery of tests, which takes about an hour to complete, then you have to pay for it. But there are abbreviated versions of the MBTI that you can find, and I'll just give you my quick précis, which is about all I can offer to these kids, which is that there are four spectra in which there are opposites. And the first of these is introverted and extroverted. We all fall somewhere on the line between totally introverted and totally extroverted. I suppose totally introverted would be somebody who's catatonic, and totally extroverted is somebody who can't shut up. And she says, oh, is that the INFP one? Yes, it is. And so, okay, so that's the first spectrum. The second spectrum is sensing and intuitive. In that case, if you show a sensing person 1,000 trees, they won't believe there's a forest. But an intuitive person, you can show them 3 trees and they assume there's a forest. That's the difference. But that again is the extremes. And so all of us fall somewhere on those spectra. And the third spectra is thinking and feeling. So the thinker is very rational and works everything out. It's all the scientific method, and anything else is suspect. Whereas the feeler is somebody who decides based on instinct, let's say, more, and doesn't care what the scientific method says. This is the truth. And so we all fall somewhere on that spectrum as well. And the final spectrum is judging and perceiving. And in judging and perceiving, the judging person goes to the grocery store and they have a shopping list, and they go and buy food only from that shopping list. And the perceiving person goes to the grocery store, walks up and down the aisles, and takes food off the shelves. Both eat, but being a P myself and my wife being a J, she makes the shopping list, and if she doesn't get something, she says, "Oh, it wasn't on the list," and I'm the one that buys the ice cream.
I said the same thing. I said the same thing to a friend of mine. I said, "Oh my God, I went in there just to buy everything I need to make the perfect tacos, and I ended up buying everything for the for the whole week." And
Yep.
he said, "Well, because he's also a list kind of guy, he said to me, well, at least you don't have to go back to the supermarket."
You saved yourself some work. So
Yeah.
So one of the rules is that in your spouse, you want to find someone who is not all the same issue, because if that you do that, you're going to be bored out of your skull. And if everything is different, if you're opposite in every way, then you're going to be constantly battling. And so it's best to have two or three that are the same if you're going to have a good marriage, and or a good partner that you can live with. Two or three the same. And if you do that, then the differences are good differences. And so my wife is J and I'm P, and so because we know about this, we can say, "Oh, that's so J of you," or "That's so P of you," so we can make a joke out of it and not let it come between us in our marriage. It works pretty well for us, but it just depends. I mean, an extreme introvert, which I am, has to marry an extrovert, or he's not going to get to go to any parties. And I married an introvert, so my wife and I are both silent as church mice for the first hour of every morning, while she's doing Tibetan Buddhist meditation and I'm painting. We're just quiet. We're totally introverted in that way. But we do exchange ideas after that. So
That sounds really, honestly, that's beautiful, because there's nothing worse than waking up and getting mauled by conversation. It's like,
yeah,
why don't you take the waking a little more slowly?
Yeah.
Go dance in the yard.
So the most that we exchange before we go into our meditation is my wife will come out of the bedroom. She usually gets up about a hour to hour later than I do. And so I just say good morning as she comes out. And then usually I've had the coffee cooking, but I'm so engrossed in my painting that I haven't gotten myself a cup of coffee yet. She says, "Do you want coffee?" And I say, "Yep." And she gives it to me. And that's the only exchange we have until after we've done our meditation.
It's so funny. I had a roommate who was, I don't know if this is synchronicity, but she was also from Jordan, and she was a Leo.
Mhm.
And every morning she would meditate and do Pilates and yoga with South African rap music. And I would tell her, do you mind? It's so early. I haven't even had my coffee yet. So then one day she got so sick and tired of me because our energies were just not complementary.
Mhm.
You know, she wanted to be hyped up, whereas I wanted to start my day with like, you know, peace and let me catch up, you know, with the universe and feel the vibrations of the cosmos. And she's like, yeah, let's go. Doom, 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 doom. And I'm like,
Yeah.
one day she
Yeah.
got so fed up with me that she basically gave me a taste of my own medicine. And she wrote a little note for me. All her stuff one morning, all her stuff was gone, and she just left like a little card for me, and it said something like, "This isn't gonna work. Ciao." I'm like, phew,
Yep.
thank God. Goodbye.
Yep. Yep.
My
Yep. Yep. Yep.
peace. Don't ever get a Leo roommate unless you're a Gemini or you're
Right.
into that kind of stuff. If you need that motivation.
If you're extremely introverted, don't necessarily get an extremely extroverted person, because that's what you're describing right now.
He's ultra
Yeah.
extroverted, popping right out of the dictionary.
Yeah. But on the other hand, being a little introverted and the other a little extroverted means that you get to go to parties. And you can, as the introvert, you can stand over in the corner
It
and
was
talk
not
to somebody.
necessary. My bathroom smelled like the ladies' lounge. I was like, what's going on here? Next thing you know, she's gonna ask me, do you want a cigarette for $1? You want some perfume? Some
Yeah. Yeah, it could get pretty wild. But
It's funny.
anyway,
I think it's funny because earlier, 20 years ago, yeah, about 20 years ago. I mean, to me, sleep was just a NASA countdown. Because as soon as my eyes open, I'm blasting off, going, just jumping at it. And now there's a whole, even on my schedule, there's a ding ding that's an hour. That's just that the meeting is waking slowly.
right. So I hope Kathy was talking about my explanation. She said that was a great explanation. Thanks. All right. Well, my explanation is an extremely essentialized explanation of the MBTI. So, it is much more detailed and complicated than that. And if you take the full instrument, which I've done many times, it really does expose you to who you really are, what you really are. And so I highly recommend it. It's out of favor in the psychological community right now. I don't know why, but I think it's because the people with whom it's out of favor are not Jungians, probably.
Well, and actually, it's been co-opted. There's also something called a DISC profile,
Right.
DISC. So you have the people who are fact checkers versus the dominant versus the introvert versus the social, or I'm not sure what they all say, but there are a lot of other systems that have kind of co-opted it.
Yeah.
And I think watered down the MBTI usage, and also the free mini versions. Well, it's like a modern soundbite. You're getting, quick fix, but not going terribly deep. And
yeah, but I do feel that even knowing my basic explanation, it really helps to understand people. I mean, I've been using it now for 40 years, and my God, it helped me so much in business. I can't even begin to say. It just really works. And I have a few other psychological tricks that really have worked in business. And, they just have guided me in terms of my interactions with people from all over the world. And, the other one is neuro-linguistic programming, especially, and mirroring within NLP, where, if you put your hand out here, you mirror that person's hand, or if they put their hand like this, you put your hand so it mirrors, as it's doing on my screen at the moment. And that gets people comfortable with you right away, okay, really fast. In other words, if you start mirroring them, I got so that I just do it naturally now, and have done for 30 years or so. But, if you do it, you'll find that people relate to you very well, very quickly.
I find that it obviously physically induces a resonant synchronizing of, and what happens is it takes the physical out of the equation, so that the danger scenario, where's the closest exit, some people, think, can go away, and they can settle in to connect and communicate instead of still kind of sizing up and interviewing, where they really will play the surface rather than the substance. And then it's funny, I noticed that sometimes when I notice someone mirroring me just to mirror me, but they're not doing it naturally, I'll start moving on purpose. And as soon as they start moving, I'll move somewhere else. And
that's a good way. That's a good way to cause discomfort.
Well, that way they get them back to be honest. It's like, could you please come to the table instead of trying to think that, I'm not a fish, so stop dangling the line.
Yeah, right. So, okay. So anyway, that's where we are. I'm going to have to call a halt here for today. We will continue again on page 474, where it says paragraph 3 at the bottom of the page, as where we begin next week. And so thank you everyone for being here. We still have probably 4 or 5 weeks before we get to the 7 sermons to the dead, which are, if you can't wait for the 7 sermons, I did record them before, and you can find the playlist on this YouTube channel and go listen to them. But in terms of this discussion, reading and commentary, we'll get to it in 4 or 5 weeks. So thank you, Jordan.
I have one more question before we close shop.
Okay.
It was the one for back to footnote 12, Matthew 8:21 to 8:22. And another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said unto him, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. What does that mean? I'm not getting it.
Well, it means, when you're dead, you don't know you're dead. It's only difficult for your family. When you're stupid, it works the same way. And so the point is that burying your father can wait, but Jesus was going to give a teaching right then, and he wanted his follower to hear it. That's the way I take it.
Well, I'd say yes, and also dead burying the dead means respect your dead. Don't dig in your dirt. Go inside. Leave the dead dead. Don't exhume them and try to, because it's, in a sense, there's a poison. So let the dead bury the dead means stay alive. So it's interesting to me if I look at different warrior or fighter philosophies, a lot of people, you got to get in there and be all aggressive and fight to the death. And no, you should fight like cats. They don't fight to the death. they fight until they're not alive. And so what happens is they simply live. So I think when he says let the dead bury the dead is, like breed like, stay in life and don't go digging out memories. Don't go digging out things you've already gone through, because honestly that's kind of easy. Instead of that, live what's in front of you that's alive. So I kind of feel like that's what, let the dead bury the dead is. You go to the funeral, you bury, but then that's it. You can stay above ground, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I don't want to.
the timing of a funeral doesn't matter much. Okay. And so when my father died, we didn't have his service for a month, and the same with my mother, even longer, I think. Or actually, we had my mother's service, but because it was winter, we did not spread her ashes, and we had a separate ceremony when we spread her ashes 5 months later, when it was summertime and everybody could come, because everybody couldn't come in the middle of March in upstate New York. And so
Yeah, actually, my dad died February 23rd, 2021. He was cremated, and we didn't have the memorial service until June of that summer, just because of COVID, and so the whole family could be there.
Yeah.
And there was just so much going on, and
Sure.
So there's the mark the time of death, but then there's also the celebration at the time of the.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Yeah, Cherie says funerals can be complicated. That is definitely true. I'm sure it's complicated in Kansas City.
Well, it's
Right
it
now.
reminds me of Mark Twain's old quote of I've never wished a person dead, but I have certainly approved of several funerals.
Oh my God. That's horrible.
Oh, that takes it right to the dark side.
Yeah, exactly. I'll end mine on that.
I don't want to
All
see your
right.
shadow.
Peace, everyone. We'll see you next